All right, so are you ready to go back into the Inferno with me? We are picking up with Dante and Virgil, and if you remember from our last deep dive, they were at the end of the river of boiling blood.
And yeah, things were getting pretty heated there,
And we were left on a cliffhanger, literally.
right on the edge of the unknown.
And Canto XV begins with, now bears us onward, one of the hard margins, and so the brooklets mist or shadows it, from fire it saves the water and the dikes.
Sounds like we're moving into a new area. What do you think?
It does, but I think we're still very much in hell.
Oh, definitely still in hell. No doubt about that.
It's just a different part of the seventh circle.
So still in the seventh circle, but the scenery has shifted. Instead of a river of blood, we're now in a burning desert.
Yeah, burning desert. And things get really personal in this canto with the introduction of Brunetto Latini. Now, this isn't just some random soul. This is Dante's old teacher.
A very important figure in Dante's life, a renowned scholar and a big influence on Florentine society.
Huge influence. And yet here he is, condemned among the sodomites. Talk about an awkward reunion.
Yeah, Dante's reaction is one of shock. I can sense the surprise and the maybe even a little bit of disappointment.
Disappointment, yeah, I could see that. I mean, how would you feel if you bumped into your favorite mentor in hell?
I mean, you have this deep respect for them, but also this realization of their sin. It's a complicated situation for Dante, I think.
It is, and it also raises some questions about what was considered acceptable behavior back then, Was there more tolerance for what Dante calls sins against nature than we might assume?
Well, I think Dante's portrayal of Brunetto and the other sodomites is interesting. He doesn't depict them as monsters. There's a certain level of respect, even compassion, in his description.
It's not all fire and brimstone and condemnation. There's nuance there. And speaking of fire and brimstone, what about contrapasso? How does Brunetto's punishment connect to his sin?
So contrapasso, as we've discussed, is the idea that the punishment fits the sin. And for the sodomites, it's this constant, restless movement under a rain of fire.
Symbolic of.
Well, according to Dante, sodomy is a sin of excess, of going against the natural order. So their punishment reflects this restlessness, the inability to find peace.
Wow. So they're literally consumed by the same fire that fueled their passions in life.
In a way, yes. It's a pretty brutal, but also very poetic way of looking at it.
It is. Okay, so Dante's found his old teacher in hell, and they're having this very intense conversation, surrounded by all this torment. What happens next?
Well, before Brunetto disappears back into the throng of souls, he gives Dante a prophecy.
Oh no, what does he say?
Well, he warns Dante about his future exile from Florence. He tells him he will face betrayal and hardship, that his good deeds will be turned against him.
So Dante's going to be exiled.
That's what Brunetto foretells. And he even gives him a cryptic piece of advice to keep the grass far from the goat. It sounds like a warning about the political factions that were tearing Florence apart at the time.
So not only is Dante on this terrifying journey through hell, but he's also got this looming sense of doom hanging over him.
It's a pretty bleak outlook.
Does knowing his future fate change Dante's perspective on the other souls he meets, do you think? Does it make him harsher or more sympathetic?
That's a really interesting question, and I think it adds another layer of complexity to Dante's journey. He's not just an observer, he's also a participant. And his own experiences shape his understanding of hell.
It's not just an abstract journey, it's a very personal one. It's almost like foreshadowing too, right? This prophecy is like a glimpse into Dante's personal hell.
It adds a whole new dimension to the narrative. And it also makes you think about the nature of prophecy itself, Is it inevitable or can it be changed?
Ooh, those are big questions. Maybe something to ponder as we continue our deep dive.
It's interesting, though, that Dante doesn't just say, oh, there were other people there. He actually names some of the sodomites that Brunetto was hanging out with.
Oh, that's right. Like who?
Well, he mentions Priscian, a grammarian, Francesco de Corso, a jurist, and even makes a comment about there being lots of church officials and literary figures.
That makes sense, right? They're all about words.
But I also think it's Dante's way of highlighting the pervasiveness of sin, even among the intellectual elite.
It's like he's saying nobody's immune, no matter how smart or respected you are.
And it adds this layer of historical context, too, connecting Dante's journey to real people and events.
Okay, but then he goes even further, right? Brunetto says most of his companions are clerics and men of letters and fame. That's a pretty bold statement, don't you think?
Especially considering the power of the church at the time, it's almost like Dante is directly challenging their authority, suggesting that hypocrisy and corruption run rampant even within the church.
I mean, to say that out loud back then would have been really risky.
Absolutely. It shows how deeply Dante felt about the corruption he saw within the church. He's not afraid to speak truth to power, even if it means risking his own safety.
So we've got this shocking revelation about the church, and we've got this chilling prophecy about Dante's future. What's the overall takeaway from this encounter with Brunetto?
I think it's multifaceted. On one hand, it reminds us that sin is universal, that no one is above temptation, no matter how intelligent or accomplished they might be. On the other hand, it shows the complexity of human relationships. Dante clearly still admires and respects Brunetto, even though he recognizes his sin.
That tension between admiration and judgment is really fascinating. It's like he's saying we can acknowledge someone's flaws without completely erasing the good they may have done or the positive impact they had on our lives.
And I think that's a really important message for today. It's easy to judge and condemn others, but often there's a lot more to the story.
Absolutely. And, it's also worth noting that Dante doesn't dwell on the specifics of Brunetto's sin. He acknowledges it, but doesn't go into graphic detail, which I think is interesting.
It suggests that he's more interested in exploring the emotional and intellectual impact of this encounter than in sensationalizing the physical act.
And that makes it a much more powerful and thought-provoking experience for the reader. We're left to grapple with these complex ideas on our own terms without being spoon-fed the answers.
That's part of what makes Dante such a brilliant writer. He trusts his readers to engage with the material and draw their own conclusions.
Exactly. So, listener, as you go about your day, I encourage you to reflect on what we've discussed. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking the light.